Good morning. I'm your host, Corey. I am here with my lovely coffee. And today, on today's episode, we are talking about imposter syndrome. The famous imposter syndrome. For those who aren't familiar, it's basically you sabotaging yourself and you thinking that you're not good enough, or you're comparing yourself to others. Like, I can't get that senior dev job because I've never been a senior before. It's discounting our efforts and legitimate achievements that we've done and basically going, we don't deserve it. So the reason why I want to talk about this so much, or why I'm excited to talk about this episode, is it talks about opportunity loss. And the biggest thing I can say to you, and the most valuable thing you have in your life, is time is finite and we only get one at bat. And the time that you're going to waste due to imposter syndrome is going to be huge. So whenever you're sitting there and you're thinking, hey, I can't apply for this project because I don't have the programming language for that, or I'm not good enough for this job, let me tell you, you're cutting off time off of your own life, and that's not going to benefit anyone. So it's a huge impact on yourself, on your teams, on your career. And I really don't think a lot of us talk about it. So I want to jump into the fact that I've been doing this for 10 years and I still face this myself. So it's real. It happens to all of us, whether you're junior, intermediate, senior, it doesn't matter. I haven't had a lot of coffee yet, so I'm still trying to work my way into this live stream. Let's start with some Corey story time. I need some cool intros. Corey story time, yay! I've in the past had a reportee come to me during, I think it was a one-on-one, and they were like, Corey, I can't believe you didn't know XYZ. And I was quite taken back because I was like, well, yeah, I didn't know XYZ. I don't know what it was. It was something that I guess in their mind was common knowledge, or, oh, because you're, senior developer, you should just kind of know that. Or you've been doing this so long, how do you not know that? I mean, up until that point, I didn't have imposter syndrome that day. But obviously when they brought this up, I was feeling that creeping imposter syndrome, like, oh, maybe I should have known that. Oh, maybe I'm not really that title that I have, it doesn't match my skill set. But it's important to talk about this stuff, whether on an individual level or a manager level. Because in that scenario, that person, that individual is putting expectations that are beyond reasonable on myself. And as a manager, that's not good, because that typically means that individual is also putting unrealistic expectations on themselves. Because they might look towards, let's just call them John. John looks towards me, Corey, and goes, oh, Corey doesn't know blah, blah, blah. And, his title's blah, blah, blah. How will I ever get there? How will I ever become a senior developer if, I don't know this and that? So it's good to understand that we're all learning, and that imposter syndrome is going to creep up whether you like it or not, and in different ways. Like, sometimes you don't feel it so much until someone kind of puts you in that position where you're all of a sudden you're like, oh, was I supposed to know X, Y, Z? And that self-doubt kind of creeps in your mind then, because then you're like, oh, maybe I was supposed to know about this RFC due to blah, 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 or this networking RFC, and you don't. So that was one of my Corey story times. The other Corey story time was that these moments can be traumatizing and can really hold you back. And relating back to the opportunity loss slide before, is I went for an interview. It was a long time ago. And in this interview, some of this interview was my own fault, like not coming fully prepared. And some of it was like misleading preparation, where I had reached out and I asked what to expect, and they're like, it's pretty high level overview. You're going to do, high overview is what they said. And I'm thinking, system design, no problem. And, this was a long time ago, but I was a manager at the time. I was thinking, okay, they want system design, no problem. I'm still doing that, so that's not gonna be a huge issue. And I go into the interview and I do the recruitment portion and they're like, great, all's good. And then two people come in and they're like, okay, so now for the whiteboarding exercise. And I'm thinking, okay, system design, no problem. I'm like, we'll do it on the whiteboard. And they're like, all right, we're going to write a binary tree implementation, and then we need you to write a search on the binary tree on the whiteboard. And I was so dumbfounded. Like, I was like, because my day to day is not usually coding, and I definitely had not prepped for like algos and search or anything like this. And whiteboarding is always a struggle because you're so used to having your IDE for the auto completion, and you're thinking like, oh God, what's the syntax? And you're getting marker all over your sleeve and everything. So where am I getting with this? Well, that interview went so bad that it definitely made me question whether or not I was the role that I was. Like, I left the interview thinking, oh my God, I can't believe I couldn't remember how to search this or write the implementation, and that like, it's just two nodes, like two leaves and everything's a node and just left and right. And like, you only have really two ways to go in any given scenario and all this. Then I, for a long time, was very conscious about this, and it really held me back. Like, I probably honestly lost 3 to 5 months of time off of going for the next interview. Just because I had gone to that interview that was so terrible, whether it was my fault or prior expectations being set, that it stopped me from going to any other interviews. And this is not good. and I was discounting prior achievements. It's like, oh, you've done that before. You've done the code before that. You've implemented this stuff before. You've achieved X, Y, Z. And then we go, well, yeah, but I couldn't answer that whiteboard question, therefore I must not be that title. Which is just unrealistic, right? So you have to be careful, because at least for me, it's not so much I typically feel imposter syndrome in that moment. It's more like imposter syndrome creeps out as a byproduct of something. Like, someone will come up to me and be like, oh, how did you not know blah? Or you go in and then you do an interview or something along these lines, and then all of a sudden you feel like, ooh, I don't think I was as prepared as I should have been for whatever position or things like this. So I guess that kind of leads into my tackling and improving kind of slides on this is, well, in order to be able to tackle it, we need to understand that everyone struggles with it. I don't believe when people say they don't have it. I think they have better coping mechanisms than or they have better ways of dealing with it. But considering it's doubt and uncertainty and fear, like, those emotions don't disappear. You can't unlearn those emotions. And I think at the heart of it, imposter syndrome is really diving into that. And all of us always have that. You can be literally the best. I don't know if you ever look at like professional athletes at the top of their game, and they still to this day think like, oh, so-and-so player is better on blah, blah, blah. And oh, I can't believe that I'm not that great. So it's always going to creep in, even when you're at the very peak of your career. And I did want to say that you have to also realize everyone's journey is different. I hear a lot of people where they go in and they'll be like, yeah, but John knows about AWS VPC endpoints and he's a junior and I'm supposed to be a senior and I don't know about that. But context matters. John might have spent 6 months already learning AWS, or John came from a job where he was working with Azure, and that's why John knows about that. Or maybe John just had time and read about the docs. You have to understand that everyone's learning is different and your struggles will be on different paths and everything like that. So before you even get to tackling and improving, you have to just accept that. And you have to understand that it's all right. And we're all learning, especially in this field. It's constantly changing. You're never going to know everything. And you're never even going to be a quote unquote expert, because the more you know, the more you realize how little you know in this field. So what I do, and I do recommend, is risk versus reward analysis. Ask yourself within reason, that is the key. What is the worst case that could happen to do X? Because, if you're new and you're looking for, say, a job and you're like, oh my God, I can't apply for that position. Like, I'm not qualified. And you ask yourself, what's the worst realistic thing that can happen? Because I have to say realistic, because sometimes I tell people this and they're like, I'm going to go to the interview and the comment's going to come crashing through the building and everyone's going to die. And it's like, come on. Whoa. Realistic. What is the worst thing that's going to happen going for that interview? And the realistic thing is you embarrass yourself, you look like a fool, and you don't get the job. And the reality is you're probably never going to meet that person again. They're never going to remember that moment. And in a year's time, you're going to laugh at this. So that's your limited downside. On your reward side, your upside is life-changing. It's you got a job, you got employed, you got money, you're building your skill set. Like your reward has such a tremendous amount of upside versus your risk has a very small limited downside. Like I said, the worst is you go in and someone literally laughs you out of the room. And yeah, you're going to feel hurt and you're going to feel bruised and you're going to feel like embarrassed and all this. But at the end of the day, that risk is so small compared to what your reward is. It would be different if you were telling me like, Corey, I'm going to go in this interview. And like, if I don't get this interview, like, walking home, the bus is going to hit me. Like, okay, wow, that's really bad risk. But this is why we have to be realistic with our risk and reward. The other thing I usually tell people when they get caught up, remove yourself from the equation. And what I mean by that is have a diverse group of people from different backgrounds and different walks of experience that you can kind of compare. And it's not necessarily that we want to compare ourselves to them. What we want to do is we want to take our scenario, our circumstances, and essentially apply it onto someone else and say, is that reasonable for that person? What we're trying to do is we're trying to remove ourselves, because when we think about ourselves, we're able to make a lot of context excuses. Like, oh, I can't get that job because I don't have enough experience. But if you ask someone like, hey, John over there has the same amount of experience, and you're like, oh yeah, John should apply for that job. But there's no difference. If John has the same amount of experience as you, what's the difference? And you're like, but John's better at that. And because it's easier when it's someone else, right? But when it's yourself, you're there protecting yourself. You're trying to make sure that you don't get hurt. So you're going to go, yeah, but I only have 1 year of experience. Well, John only has 1 year of experience. Yeah, but I didn't learn the same way as John. Like, you will internalize and find ways to get around it from yourself. So what I tell people is just take your circumstance and apply it to other people that you have. And you want a broad range because there's always going to be exceptions like, hey, well, that person only got that job because blah, blah, blah. But this is why we have diverse groups that we can kind of talk to and compare from different backgrounds, different walks of life, so that you don't go, oh, the only way that they were able to do that is because, well, they have a master's and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but if you have people in your group who don't have any degree, you can say, yeah, but there's another person over there who had no degree and was able to get that job. So we just have to try and remove ourselves from the equation, and almost like as if a friend came to you and said the same thing as your scenario. Hey, I have 5 years of experience. I'm trying to apply for this super senior role. And you're like, oh yeah, you should do that. You're totally qualified for it. And like, you'll find all this great thing in someone else. And that other person that you're talking to, John will tell you all the same things you're telling yourself. Yeah, but I don't feel qualified. I don't have enough experience. Oh, I've never worked with Java. It's like, but at the end of the day, it's like, what have you achieved? You've gone this far. And what is your risk? Your biggest risk. In this scenario, we're talking a lot about interviews and promotions, but your biggest risk in these scenarios is like, you don't get it. But your reward is you actually find that you were just sabotaging yourself, that you are qualified. And the outcome of those things can be life-changing. That could be money, that could be a title change, that could be a whole new career, a whole new path, that could be into leadership. Just don't limit yourself, Drink more coffee and have more confidence in yourself, and don't let imposter syndrome ruin your life. Because, like I said, time is finite and you get one at bat on this one life. There's no redos. So if you want to spend 2-3 years sulking on something that you don't think you're qualified, that's 2-3 years you've just lost. And we don't want that. Drink more coffee and more confidence. Until next time. Coffee and Dev, see you on Friday.